The dense alien forest seemed to pulse with life as Jackson Reeves made his way through the thick undergrowth. His heavy scout armor whirred softly with each step, compensating for the uneven terrain. The foreign sun cast dappled shadows through the canopy of strange turquoise-tinged leaves, creating an almost mystical atmosphere. As a veteran ranger of the Terran Expeditionary Force, Jackson had explored dozens of uncharted worlds, but something about this one felt different. The air carried an unusual sweetness, and the local flora exhibited patterns he'd never encountered before. His mission was simple: survey the planet's western continent for potential colonization. So far, he'd found nothing particularly remarkable, until now. The scene before him stopped him dead in tracks. Among the twisted roots of what appeared to be an ancient tree sat a naked humanoid woman. Her silver-white hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, and her fair skin bore a subtle blue tint that marked her as definitely non-human. Small scratches and dirt marred her otherwise flawless skin. Jackson's training kicked in as he assessed the situation. She appeared unarmed and in distress, but experience had taught him that appearances could be deceiving. He maintained a safe distance while keeping his weapon holstered. Their eyes met. Hers were large and violet-colored, filled not with fear but with a profound sadness that made his chest tighten. She looked broken, as if hope had abandoned her long ago. "Do you understand me?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle and steady. The alien woman trembled slightly, pulling her knees closer to her chest. Her lips parted, but no sound emerged. She seemed to be struggling with some internal battle. Jackson slowly began removing the outer layer of his armor, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. He unclasped his thermal cloak, standard issue for harsh environments, and held it out. "Here," he said softly, taking a careful step forward. "Let me help you." She didn't flinch or retreat as he draped the cloak over her shoulders. Instead, she watched him with an almost desperate intensity, as if trying to determine if he was real or just another cruel illusion. Several moments passed in silence. The forest around them continued its alien symphony of rustling leaves and distant creature calls. Finally, she spoke. "I don't remember." Her voice was barely above a whisper, carrying a melodic quality despite the pain evident in her tone. The words came out perfectly in standard English, which immediately raised questions in Jackson's mind. He crouched down to her level, maintaining enough distance to not appear threatening. "What's the last thing you do remember?" She clutched the cloak tighter around herself. "Pain. Darkness. Then, here." Her eyes darted around, as if expecting shadows to come alive and grab her. Jackson's jaw tightened. In his years of service, he'd seen enough to recognize the signs of trauma. Someone had done this to her, abandoned her here, stripped of everything, including her memories. "I'm Jackson Reeves, Terran Expeditionary Force," he kept his voice steady, professional yet gentle. "You're safe now. I can help you if you'll let me." She studied him for a long moment, her violet eyes seeming to peer into his soul. "Why would you help me?" The question carried no accusation, only genuine confusion, as if the concept of kindness had become foreign to her. "Because it's the right thing to do," he answered simply. "What should I call you?" A flicker of something, perhaps a memory, passed across her face. "Nythara," she whispered, then looked surprised, as if the name had surfaced from somewhere deep within her. "I think my name is Nythara." Jackson nodded and offered a reassuring smile. "Well, Nythara, my base camp is about 3 kilometers from here. There's food, clean water, and medical supplies. Will you come with me?" Nythara hesitated, her gaze moving from Jackson to the surrounding forest. For a moment, he thought she might refuse, might retreat deeper into whatever mental fortress she'd built to protect herself. But then she nodded, a barely perceptible movement. With careful movements, Jackson helped her to her feet. She was unsteady at first, leaning against him for support. The thermal cloak engulfed her slender frame, providing both warmth and dignity. "Can you walk?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "I think so," she replied, taking a tentative step forward. As they began their slow journey through the forest, Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just stepped into something much bigger than a simple rescue mission. His communication device chirped, reminding him that he needed to report into base. "Commander Higgs isn't going to believe this," he muttered, casting a sidelong glance at his mysterious companion. Nythara said nothing, her focus entirely on placing one foot in front of the other. But in the depths of her violet eyes, Jackson thought he saw something new beginning to flicker, the faintest spark of hope where before there had been only emptiness. And as the strange sun dipped lower in the alien sky, casting long shadows through the turquoise leaves, the Ranger and the alien woman continued their journey towards an uncertain future, connected by the simplest of human instincts, compassion in the face of suffering. The medical bay of Outpost Epsilon 7 buzzed with activity as Dr. Olivia Harrison carefully examined the alien woman. The sterile white walls and bright lights stood in stark contrast to the organic chaos of the forest where Jackson had found her just hours ago. "Her physiology is remarkable," Dr. Harrison murmured, studying the readings on her diagnostic tablet. "Humanoid in appearance, but her internal structure." She shook her head in wonder. "Her cellular regeneration rate is nearly triple that of humans." Jackson stood near the entrance, arms crossed over his chest. He'd shed his scout armor, now dressed in the standard gray uniform of the Terran Expeditionary Force. His eyes rarely left Nythara, who sat perched on the examination table, still wrapped in his thermal cloak. "Can you tell if she's been injured?" he asked. Dr. Harrison nodded. "There's evidence of recent trauma, mostly healed now, thanks to her biology. But there are surgical scars too, some quite old." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Some look like experimentation." Jackson's jaw clenched. "She said she couldn't remember anything before I found her." "Memory suppression, perhaps," Harrison suggested. "Either self-induced as a trauma response or artificially imposed." The door to the medical bay slid open with a soft hiss. Commander Fiona Higgs strode in, her posture rigid with military precision. Gray streaked her dark hair, and the lines around her eyes spoke of decades of service. "Report," she demanded, her gaze fixed on Nythara. "She's stable, ma'am," Dr. Harrison replied. "Physically recovering, but there are concerns about psychological trauma and memory loss." Commander Higgs approached Nythara slowly. "Has she said anything else since arriving?" "Very little," Jackson answered. "She told me her name is Nythara. But how she knows our language remains a mystery." Higgs studied the alien woman carefully. "We need to know where she came from and if others will come looking for her. This could compromise our entire mission." "She's not a threat," Jackson said firmly. "She's a victim." "You don't know that, Ranger," Higgs countered. "For all we know, this could be an elaborate setup." Nythara's violet eyes moved between them, following the conversation with evident understanding. "I'm not dangerous," she said softly, her melodic voice causing all three humans to turn toward her. "Please don't send me away." Higgs's expression softened slightly. "No one's sending you anywhere just yet. But we need answers." The commander tapped her wrist communicator. "Lieutenant Sharma to Medical Bay, bring your translation equipment." Minutes later, Priya Sharma arrived carrying a compact device. The young communications officer had a reputation for linguistic brilliance. "I've programmed the universal translator with all known alien languages in our database," she explained, setting up the equipment. "It might help us understand nuances or detect patterns even if she's speaking English." Sharma approached Nythara with a gentle smile. "Hello, I'm Priya. I'd like to ask you some questions, if that's okay." Nythara nodded cautiously. "Do you know where you're from?" Priya began. "No," Nythara whispered, then winced as if the attempt to remember caused physical pain. The translation device hummed softly, analyzing her speech patterns. Priya studied its readout with growing fascination. "This is strange," she said. "Her vocal patterns contain embedded frequencies outside normal human hearing range. She's communicating more than just the words we're hearing." "Can the device translate these frequencies?" Higgs asked. "Partially," Priya adjusted some settings. "It seems to be carrying emotional content, possibly even memory fragments." Dr. Harrison leaned forward. "Like a secondary language?" "More like music," Priya explained. "Emotions encoded in sound." Nythara watched them with growing anxiety, her fingers clutching the thermal cloak tighter around her body. "Too many questions," she whispered, her breathing becoming rapid. "Head hurts when I try to remember." Dr. Harrison moved quickly to her side. "Her vital signs are spiking. We need to stop the questioning for now." Commander Higgs frowned but nodded. "Very well. Jackson, since she seems most comfortable with you, you'll be responsible for her while she's here. Dr. Harrison, continue your medical assessment. Lieutenant Sharma, work on improving that translation. I want to know who, or what, we're dealing with." As the others filed out, Jackson remained. Nythara's breathing gradually steadied, but her eyes held a haunted look. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I want to answer. But there's a wall in my mind. When I push against it." She shuddered. "Don't force it," Jackson advised. "Memory often returns in its own time." He hesitated, then added, "We should find you some proper clothes. That thermal cloak isn't exactly comfortable for long-term wear." A ghost of a smile touched Nythara's lips, the first he'd seen. Yes, clothes would be good. Later, dressed in a standard-issue jumpsuit that hung loosely on her slender frame, Nythara stood by the viewport in Jackson's quarters, staring at the alien landscape outside. Twilight had fallen, bathing the strange forest in purple hues. "Beautiful," she murmured, placing a blue-tinged hand against the transparent barrier. "It is," Jackson agreed, watching her from across the room. "The scientists call this planet Teranova. Rich biosphere, compatible atmosphere. Could become a colony someday." Nythara's expression clouded. "Colony means many humans coming." "Eventually, perhaps," he confirmed. "Does that trouble you?" She didn't answer immediately, her gaze fixed on the darkening forest. "I feel connection to this place. Like, it speaks to me." She turned to face him. "But I don't know why." Jackson approached, standing beside her at the viewport. "Maybe you've been here before." "Maybe," she whispered. Then, unexpectedly, she reached out and touched his hand. "Thank you for finding me. For bringing me here." The simple gesture carried a weight of gratitude that transcended words. Jackson felt an unfamiliar protectiveness surge through him. "Get some rest," he said gently. "Tomorrow might bring more answers." As Nythara retreated to the small sleeping alcove, Jackson's communicator beeped softly. A message from Commander Higgs. Security Council meeting at 0600. Long-range scanners have detected something entering the system. Unknown origin. Jackson glanced at Nythara, now curled up on the narrow bed, her silver-white hair spread across the pillow like a halo. For the first time since he'd found her, she looked peaceful. But as he studied the message again, a cold certainty settled in his gut. Whatever, or whoever, had abandoned Nythara on this planet, they might be coming back. And Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that when they did, peace would be the first casualty. The observation room hummed with quiet tension as Commander Higgs studied the holographic display. The three-dimensional image showed a fleet of ships, at least 7, moving through the outer reaches of the Teranova system. Trajectory suggests they'll reach planetary orbit in approximately 72 hours, reported Lieutenant Commander Javier Rodriguez, head of tactical operations. His dark eyes narrowed as he manipulated the display, enhancing the image of the lead vessel. Design doesn't match any known species in our database. Jackson stood near the back of the room, arms crossed over his chest. He'd left Nythara in Dr. Harrison's care after she'd woken screaming from nightmares she couldn't, or wouldn't, describe. Could be traders, suggested Colonel Marcus Fletcher, a grizzled veteran with a reputation for calm under pressure. This sector sees all kinds of traffic. Traders don't move information, Higgs countered. And they don't typically carry energy signatures consistent with weapons systems. She turned to face the assembled officers. I believe these ships are connected to our visitor. The timing is too convenient to be coincidence. All eyes turned to Jackson, who straightened under their collective gaze. Nythara still hasn't recovered her memories. But Dr. Harrison believes the blocks are beginning to deteriorate. We need to accelerate that process, Higgs said firmly. Whatever's coming, we need to know what we're facing. Forcing memory recovery could cause psychological damage, Jackson protested. Colonel Fletcher cleared his throat. Sometimes difficult decisions must be made for the greater good, Ranger. If those ships are hostile, my 43 personnel deserve to know why. Before Jackson could respond, his communicator chirped urgently. Dr. Harrison's voice came through, tense with excitement. Ranger Reeves, you need to come to medical immediately. She's remembering. The medical bay was dimly lit when Jackson arrived. Nythara sat rigid on the examination table, her violet eyes wide and unfocused. Dr. Harrison stood nearby, a neural monitor in her hand, while Priya worked with her translation device. It started about 20 minutes ago, Harrison explained in a hushed voice. She was resting when her brainwave patterns suddenly spiked. She began speaking in what appears to be her native language. Priya nodded, her fingers moving rapidly over her equipment. The translator is struggling, but I'm getting fragments. Something about the harvesting and genetic potential. Jackson approached slowly, not wanting to disrupt whatever was happening. Nythara, he called softly. Can you hear me? Her head turned toward his voice, but her eyes didn't focus on him. They came from the darkness between stars, she whispered, her voice taking on a strange, distant quality. The Vordaren. They said they sought alliance. We believed them. The Vordaren, Priya repeated, quickly entering the name into her database. No matches in our records. They studied us first, Nythara continued, tears now streaming down her blue-tinged cheeks. Said our biology was remarkable. Compatible yet advanced. Then the harvesting began. Her breathing became rapid, and the medical monitors began to beep in warning. Dr. Harrison moved forward, concerned, but Jackson gestured for her to wait. What is the harvesting, Nythara? He asked gently. They took our children first. Said they were adapting them. Improving them. Her voice broke. Then adults. Test subjects. I was research division. Xenobiology. They made me watch what they did to my people. Horror dawned on Jackson's face as the implications became clear. They were experimenting on your species. Nythara nodded, her eyes finally focusing on him. My people, the Liarans, we have natural regenerative abilities. Rapid healing. Extended lifespans. The Vordaren wanted this for themselves. Genetic theft, Dr. Harrison whispered. They were trying to incorporate alien DNA into their own genome. I sabotaged their research, Nythara said, her voice stronger now, filled with a quiet pride. Changed formulas. Destroyed samples. When they discovered my betrayal, punishment was extraction. She touched her temple, wincing at the memory. They took my knowledge. My memories. Left me to die on an unfamiliar world. But you survived, Jackson said softly. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Liarans are difficult to kill. Dr. Harrison stepped forward. The ships entering the system, are they Vordaren? Fear flashed across Nythara's face. They found me? How? We don't know for certain they're looking for you, Jackson said quickly. But we need to prepare for that possibility. Nythara's hands began to tremble. If they find me, they'll destroy your outpost. Take what they want. They have no concept of mercy or honor. The door to the medical bay slid open, and Commander Higgs entered, her expression grim. We just intercepted a transmission. It was broadcast on all frequencies, clearly meant for anyone listening. She activated her wrist communicator, and a harsh, guttural voice filled the room. The language was unfamiliar, full of clicking consonants and sharp vowels. Nythara recoiled as if physically struck. Vordaren, she whispered. Priya's translation device hummed, processing the alien speech. After a moment, it produced a rough translation. Attention human settlement. You harbor a fugitive of the Vordaren Collective. The female Liaran is our property. Surrender her immediately upon our arrival or face consequences. Resistance is inadvisable. Your technology is inferior. Your defense is inadequate. You have 3 planetary rotations to comply. Silence fell over the medical bay as the transmission ended. Commander Higgs looked to Nythara, her expression unreadable. Is what they're saying true? Are you their property? Nythara's violet eyes flashed with sudden anger. No living being is property. What they did to my people, to me, was genocide disguised as scientific advancement. Jackson stepped between Nythara and the commander. We can't turn her over to them. I'm not suggesting we should, Higgs replied evenly. But we need to know exactly what we're facing. She turned back to Nythara. How many Liarans survived? I don't know, Nythara admitted. There was a resistance movement. Plans for escape ships. But I was captured before. Her voice trailed off as a new memory surfaced. The distress beacon. I activated an emergency signal before they took me. Hope flickered across her face. If any of my people survived, if they intercepted that signal. Then the Vordaren might not be the only ones looking for you, Jackson finished. Commander Higgs straightened, decision made. Colonel Fletcher, begin evacuation preparations for non-essential personnel. Lieutenant Sharma, broadcast a message on all frequencies, we need to let any potential Liaran allies know we're friendly. Dr. Harrison, I want a complete analysis of Vordaren physiology based on what Nythara can tell us. If we have to fight, I want to know their weaknesses. As the others hurried to carry out their orders, Higgs turned to Jackson. Ranger Reeves, you found her. She trusts you. Stay with her, learn everything you can. After the commander left, Jackson turned to find Nythara watching him, her expression troubled. You should leave this place, she said softly. All of you. The Vordaren will show no mercy. Jackson shook his head. That's not how humans operate. We don't abandon people who need help. Even when it means risking your own lives, she asked, genuine confusion in her voice. Especially then, he replied. It's called compassion. Something worth fighting for. For the first time since he'd found her, Nythara's lips curved into a real smile, small, hesitant, but genuine. Then perhaps, she said quietly, I was fortunate to be abandoned on a world where humans were exploring. Outside the viewport, the first stars began appearing in the Teranova sky. Somewhere among them, 2 forces were converging on this previously unremarkable planet, one bent on reclaiming what they saw as property, the other possibly searching for a lost daughter of their species. And caught in the middle was a small human outpost about to learn firsthand that in the vast tapestry of galactic politics, compassion could be both the greatest weakness and the greatest strength. Colonel Fletcher mobilized the outpost's defenses as the Vordaren ships approached. Tactical screens showed 7 warships entering orbit, their weapon systems powering up. Commander Higgs called an emergency council where Nythara revealed crucial information about Vordaren vulnerabilities, their exoskeletons were sensitive to specific sonic frequencies. Meanwhile, Priya detected a faint signal at the edge of the system, potentially Liaran rescue ships. With only hours before the Vordaren arrived, Dr. Harrison developed sonic disruptors based on Nythara's knowledge. Jackson helped Nythara recover more memories, strengthening her resolve to fight back against her former captors. The outpost prepared for battle as an ultimatum arrived: surrender Nythara or face destruction. Commander Higgs's response was brief and unmistakable: we protect our own. The Vordaren attack came at dawn. Drop ships descended through the atmosphere while the main fleet bombarded the outpost's shields. Colonel Fletcher's defense teams deployed the sonic disruptors, causing the first wave of Vordaren soldiers to collapse in agony, their exoskeletons vibrating at painful frequencies. Nythara joined Jackson on the front lines, her natural regenerative abilities making her a formidable fighter. When a Vordaren commander recognized her, he revealed their true purpose: her unique genetic structure was the key to their species' survival against a degenerative disease. The battle intensified as the outpost's shields began to fail. Commander Higgs ordered a strategic retreat to the underground bunkers, but Jackson and Nythara became separated from the main group. Cornered by Vordaren troops, they prepared for their final stand. Just as hope seemed lost, the sky lit up with new energy signatures. 3 sleek vessels broke through the atmosphere, their weapons targeting the Vordaren ships with surgical precision. A transmission in Nythara's melodic language filled the communications channels. The Liaran resistance had arrived, led by Nythara's brother Thynel. Their advanced technology quickly turned the tide of battle, forcing the Vordaren into retreat. When the Vordaren commander attempted one final desperate attack to capture Nythara, Jackson took a severe injury protecting her. As Jackson lay wounded, Nythara used her species' healing abilities to save his life, transferring some of her own regenerative energy into him. The transfer created an unexpected bond, a psychic connection that allowed them to share thoughts and memories. With the Vordaren defeated and in retreat, the Liarans revealed the truth: their species was nearly extinct, with only a few hundred survivors scattered across distant worlds. Nythara's genetic research before her capture had been working toward a cure for the same disease affecting the Vordaren, but through ethical means that didn't require harvesting other species. Commander Higgs proposed an alliance between humans and Liarans. The Terran Expeditionary Force would help locate scattered Liaran survivors, while the Liarans would share their advanced medical and technological knowledge. As the human outpost began rebuilding, Nythara stood with Jackson at the edge of the forest where he had found her. The psychic bond between them had grown stronger, allowing her to finally understand the human concept that had saved her: unconditional compassion. "My people have technology and healing," she said softly. "But yours have something perhaps more valuable: the courage to help strangers, even at great cost." Jackson smiled, the scars from his injuries already fading thanks to the Liaran healing. "That's what makes us human." Nythara looked up at the stars, no longer feeling lost or alone. "Then perhaps humanity's greatest strength isn't in your weapons or your technology, but in your hearts." As the twin moons of Teranova rose above the horizon, the once-abandoned alien girl found herself surrounded by a new family, part human, part Liaran, but united by bonds stronger than blood. The forest that had once witnessed her despair now bore silent witness to her hope. And somewhere in the vastness of space, the news spread from world to world: on a small, unremarkable planet, an unlikely alliance had been born, one that might someday change the course of galactic history.